Dear friends, in this recording, I'd like to talk to you about Christians and voting or not voting for Trump in the US in the elections coming up now in 2020. So this is Pastor Enoch Lavender speaking, and I'd just like to share with you a bit around this. Now, some people might say, is there anything good about Trump? The media will portray him consistently as stupid, angry, unpredictable, swearing, immoral. Yet 80% of white evangelicals voted for him in the 2016 election. How can Christians vote for him back then and today in 2020? I just want to share with you a few of very many reasons why Christians have been standing with Trump quite firmly despite what can be seen as his weaknesses and his faults. So firstly, we'll talk about the abortion movement. Trump is the first sitting president to address the Right for Life rally, which is seeking to overturn some of the abortion rights in the US. He has appointed over 187 federal conservative judges who are likely to support restrictions on abortion. Abortion is on such a large scale across the US and across the world, where it has become a matter of convenience. Now, the debate and discussion has been what to do about a young, let's say 15-year-old girl who's been raped and who's got an unwanted pregnancy. But the truth is that the vast majority of abortions have to do with consensual sex between adults, and a child is on its way. And it's become a method of convenience. And we know that the life in the womb, it is a life. It's not about the woman's body per se. It is about a new life started within her. Now, these judges that Trump has appointed are going to leave an impact decades after Trump is gone. So while we may debate what Trump is saying today, maybe some of his harsh words today, in 15, 20 years' time, those words will be forgotten. But the judges he has appointed and the impact of the rulings that they take will last for generations. Now, Planned Parenthood, they proudly supported Hillary Clinton with $15 million, and she famously defended full-term and late-term abortions. Obama, while he was in charge, used his office to promote abortion worldwide and link it in with aid campaigns, coercing and pushing governments in developing nations to have more fuller support for abortions even there. Now, Planned Parenthood is going to triple its support for Biden with $45 million in this election. So the battlegrounds and the battle lines are very, very clear on this matter. When it comes to gay rights, Obama famously celebrated the passing of gay marriage. And this was passed by liberal judges reinterpreting the Constitution. So no, it wasn't brought to a vote for the American public. It was judges who were looking at the old Constitution of America and reinterpreting its meanings to apply into a modern context, taking it out of the context of when it was written to make it apply and give room for, in this case, gay marriage without even giving the people of America a right to vote on it. And Obama celebrated this, and he rejoiced in this. And he promoted LGBT rights globally and was also giving Christian organizations a hard time who would be trying to stand on a clearer Christian moral ground regarding the gay community. While obviously loving the community, as Christians we are not celebrating the gay rights movement, nor its attempt to infiltrate how we speak and how we act and who we can employ or not employ. Trump has scaled back Obama's monthly annual celebration of gay rights and is focused instead on strengthening the rights of religious organizations. When it comes to free speech in general, Trump has been working to repeal the Johnson Amendment, which was hindering the free speech of religious leaders concerning political matters, threatening them to lose their taxable charitable status which would impact their financial bottom line. And so Trump has been working to repeal this because he wants Christian leaders and religious leaders to be able to speak out publicly what they believe and why they believe it. And it is important that Christian leaders can speak and share what they believe and how that influences even how we vote. Because our faith is not a private matter. It impacts how we live and how we see society and how we believe society should be run. And it is important that Christian leaders and other leaders can share what they believe without fear of retribution from the tax authority. Obama removed Pastor Louis Giglio from speaking at his inauguration due to historical remarks he made against gay rights many years earlier. And that's an example of how Obama would not have Christians in his circle who would not go along with a gay rights agenda. Meanwhile, Trump has filled his administration and his inner circle with strong evangelicals and evangelical leaders. Unparalleled support for Israel. Moving, of course, the embassy to Jerusalem. Everyone said it couldn't be done. He did it. Everyone said it would spark war. It didn't. Yes, there was anger in Arab nations, but that's nothing new. Yes, there are anti-Israel demonstrations in those nations, but that's nothing new. And he was simply recognizing the historical fact that the Jews and the land of Israel has a strong historical connection to the city of Jerusalem. It's been a city that the Jews have prayed towards ever since the exile began almost 2,000 years ago. And so moving the embassy to Jerusalem was standing with and supporting Israel's claim to this holy city. Recognizing the Golan Heights as well as part of Israel, and standing against the UN's systematic anti-Israel hypocrisy, where the UN again and again singles out Israel for condemnation, while turning a blind eye to the evil of the dictators in its midst, to the human rights abuses systematically happening in countries like North Korea, Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and standing firmly against Israel, a democracy in the midst of a very volatile region. It doesn't mean that Israel is perfect, but the UN has applied a completely different approach to Israel while completely ignoring the faults of so many other nations. And of course, Trump undid Obama's famous and dangerous deal with Iran, which basically paved the way for them to work towards nuclear weapons, and gave them lots of cash to do so. Now, it strengthened Iran's influence in the region, and the struggle we're seeing today in Syria, in Yemen, and other places of the Middle East can be traced back to Obama's strengthening of Iran's hand. Thankfully, Trump has stood firmly against Iran, and today the Iranian government is weaker than it was during Obama's term, as there is a growing ferment in the public against the Iranian government. He has stood against globalism. Free trade is something that has been promoted and embraced by both sides of politics in the US and in many other countries. But it has destroyed the local industries in our Western nations because we are simply not able to compete with workers in poorer countries in the third world if we are allowing their products to be imported without any tax and without any tariffs. So it has destroyed our industries, destroyed our factories, laid off many, many workers. And Trump has had the courage to stand against this and to fight for those workers. Now, it doesn't mean he's done it perfectly, but he has been one of very, very, very few leaders who's actually taken a stand against this whole movement. He's opposed this as well as the globalist agenda of the UN and other agencies like this. He has said we need to stand for our rights as a nation. We will fight for our rights, and we expect other national leaders to stand for their rights and do what's best for their countries. Now, Christians could ask, well, shouldn't we support globalism? I mean, the whole idea is that there'll be more peace on earth as countries and nations work together, as we interrelate in trade. It'll become too costly to have wars, and so there'll be less war and less destruction. So, shouldn't Christians support globalism? Well, it might sound peaceful enough, but if we go back to the Bible record, The first time we saw globalism in action was at the Tower of Babel, and God opposed the globalism back then, and he scattered the people and he scattered the nations. Has he changed? No, I don't believe he has. And he saw in the globalism attempt, he saw rebellion against himself, a rebellion against God that was coming as the nations were joined together. But God has intended for us to be separate and to maintain our individual nationalities and our identities and to worship him in our own languages and tongues. Even in the Bible it tells us that in heaven one day we'll all be worshipping him in our own, from every tongue, from every tribe, from every nation. So I believe that God has ordained nations. He's ordained borders. The globalist movement wants to tear down the borders, have free immigration. But we know that we need to have border protections to find out who is coming into our country. Yes, we should be compassionate and allow refugees and people who are from war-torn countries to come to our land. Yet we need to have a process in place to protect our nation from just anyone coming in. So I believe that we as Christians should not be supporting the globalist movement or the removal of boundaries, and Trump has stood very firm in this area. But what about? What about Trump's tweets, and what about his harsh words? Well, I want to quote Dr. Camille Majesley, who is a mentor of mine, and he said that Trump is America's first wartime president in the culture war. Camille goes on to explain that there is a full-blown war between conservative and liberal values happening right now all across the Western world. And in many nations, those standing for conservative values have capitulated. They have simply gone with the flow of the various rights movements to embrace a more liberal way of life. Yet Trump has understood that there is a real fight happening between conservative values and liberal values, between those who stand for the values of the Bible and those who want to throw the Bible out of society. Now, in the war, Camille explains, the rules of behavior are different. In a war, the gloves have to come off, and you can't be gentle, meek, and mild. You have to stand firm, and that is what Trump has done. Yes, his words have been harsh. Yes, they have been strong. But he has recognized there's a fight, and he's been fighting for conservative values. Turning the other cheek is not the Bible's direction to national leaders. As Christians, we have sometimes thought that's how our nations should be governed. But no, that is how we as Christians should live our lives on a personal level. But when it comes to nations and rulers and governments, God has ordained for them to have a sword. He has ordained for them to punish what is evil and stand for what is right. He's ordained for them to be in charge and to even defend their nation, even through wars. Because if we cannot run nations on the principle of turning the other cheek. There has to be a firmness, there has to be a strength. And in so doing, that protects the values of freedom and liberty that our nation is built on. So we shouldn't apply the values of personal Christianity to the national leaders. Yes, they should on the personal level come to Christ, and that is our prayer. But when it comes to governing the nation, they have to be firm and they have to stand for strong protection of the borders of a nation. And you could also ask, what about Trump's personal life? Now, we all know his personal life is not that of a model citizen. And if he was going to be voted in as a pastor for a church, I would not be voting for him. He is not going to be my pastor, but that is not his role. He is a leader. He's a leader of a nation. Many have compared him to Cyrus in the Bible, and Cyrus in the Bible was from an idol-worshipping nation, and no doubt he worshipped idols himself. He was far from perfect, yet God called him, ordained him, and raised him up, and he performed God's agenda in that time, opening the door for Israel regarding the land, opening the door for Jews to return home to Israel, which in itself prepared the way of the Messiah. And many Christians are supporting Trump because they see him too, like Cyrus of old, opening the door to the plans God has for Israel and the nations in the end times. So yes, he's not perfect, but like Cyrus, he has a key role. He has embraced pro-Christian policies and surrounded himself with Christian advisors. And some of them have spoken very strong words to him that he has listened to and he has heard. The 2020 election. It is a fight. It's a fight between Trump's conservative value platform and the Liberals, between pro-life and pro-choice, between conservative versus activist judges, between supporting or opposing Israel, between socialism and capitalism, and much, much more. I believe that Trump needs our prayers. He has been under intense pressure, day and night, from a very hostile media. We know that witches have been coming against him. We know that everyone has been standing against him. But we as believers need to stand firm and pray for him in this time. Yes, we know he's not perfect, and we are allowed and free to speak up on the things that he needs to adjust. But let's stand with him and pray for him in the upcoming elections. And Christians, we need to see through the media spin. And we need to, those of us who can, those of us who are in the US, get out and vote. Make sure you vote at this election. Don't waste your vote or waste your voice. So this is Pastor Enoch Lavender speaking, and I hope this has been a help. For those of you who are wondering whether or not you should be standing with Trump in the upcoming 2020 elections. These are my reasons, and feel free to share this video with others, and also you can leave your comments in the comment field if you have some comments on this matter. Thank you, and God bless.